Well, joining us on NDTV today is the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs of Saudi Arabia, Mr. Adil Al Jubair, on what is a very important visit of the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia on his first state visit to India. So very, very big thanks to you for joining us on NDTV today.
My pleasure.
Beyond the India-Saudi Arabia joint statement today, how did the talks really go between Prime Minister Modi and the Crown Prince?
The talks were excellent. The two leaders have known each other for a few years. They had very good meetings. They had excellent meetings in Buenos Aires on the sidelines of the G20. And here in the meetings in New Delhi were outstanding in all areas.
And the particular focus, for instance, being on Saudi investments in India, the Crown Prince has talked about looking at $100 billion in investment in India over the next couple of years. If you could tell us more about that.
We look at India as one of our key strategic partners in terms of economics as well as in terms of politics. We believe that our two countries have had relations before they were even countries for thousands of years. We were neighboring civilizations. We traded with each other. We have people-to-people exchanges for thousands of years, and we have always been at peace with each other. And so the environment and the history has been very productive and very positive. In the modern era, we have had very strong ties in terms of founding the non-aligned movement, promoting the principle of non-interference, and protecting the values of sovereign immunities and sovereignty of nations. So philosophically, we're very much aligned. And then, of course, now economically, we've become much more aligned. India is one of our largest markets for crude oil. Saudi Arabia is the largest supplier of crude to India, one of the largest. India has huge potential in terms of a growing economy. In a few years, the Indian economy will be the third largest in the world. We want to be part of it. We want to take advantage of it. India has tremendous technology. We want to be part of it, take advantage of it. And Indian companies have taken advantage of the Saudi market, whether it's in petrochemicals, whether it's in refining, or whether it's in retailing. So those economic relations are growing by leaps and bounds. The figure that His Royal Highness spoke about is really broken down into $44 billion in terms of refinery and petrochemical plants that Aramco and SABIC are doing with Indian
And that's $44 billion for the refinery alone.
And the associated infrastructure that goes with it. It'll be, I believe, the largest refining complex in the world. The SoftBank fund has invested $10 billion in Indian technology companies. And I believe the Public Investment Fund is looking at or has invested more than $5 billion. The joint working team between Saudi Arabia and India that is looking for investment opportunities in both countries has identified, I believe, more than 40 projects with a value of over 26 billion. And we believe this is just the beginning. There's a lot of opportunity for Saudi investments in India and a lot of opportunity for Indian investments in Saudi Arabia. And we believe that the sky is the limit.
The sky's the limit. Let me turn to the strategic aspect of the relationship. And as you mentioned, India is now considered by Saudi Arabia to be one of its 8 strategic partners. I think it's no secret that there was a lot of disappointment in India when the Saudi-Pakistan joint statement came out. And I have it here in front of me, and there is a particular line, which says that both countries also underlined the need for avoiding the politicization of the UN listing regime. This seems to give an appearance that Saudi Arabia would be opposed to the listing of Masood Azhar, the founder of the Jaish-e-Mohammed, as a global terrorist at the United Nations. Is that the case?
We believe that any person who's implicated in terrorism or in the financing of terrorism ought to be not only listed, ought to be tried, convicted, and punished. This is what we do in Saudi Arabia. This is what we expect other countries to do. With regards to the listing issue, originally it had to do with the financial issues that involve FATF. And then I guess it was, FATF was taken out, and so it read like this. So I don't believe that it pertains specifically to the issue you mentioned. Our policy on listing individuals is very clear. If somebody is engaged in terrorism, if somebody belongs to a terrorist organization that is responsible for the murder of people, if somebody finances terrorism or recruits for terrorism, that person is implicated in terrorism and ought to be punished. And if you can't capture that person, he or she ought to be designated so that they cannot roam the world freely, and when they're captured, they're brought to justice.
So do you believe that Masood Azhar is a fit case to be designated a global terrorist?
I don't really have much background on this issue, so I'm not in a position to judge. Normally what happens is countries bring forward evidence, and they bring forward, they make designations, and then it's assessed by individuals at the United Nations, and then the person is listed or not listed. I know that there are a number of groups, including in Pakistan, that are designated as terrorist organizations, and we think that people should go after them very robustly, and that we don't think that countries, we believe that countries should have a zero tolerance policy when it comes to terrorism or extremism.
It's interesting on the question of Masood Azhar, and you're saying that normally countries have to put forward evidence. I'm sure India would have raised that in the talks, the delegation level talks with the Prime Minister today, because this is something that is really on our minds.
Yes, our colleagues in India have mentioned this to us. We have security channels through which such information is exchanged, and I expect that this information will be exchanged. We have also hear from the other side that no, we're not involved in this. This was something outside. We don't know who did it. We have no control over this organization, and whatever it is. But so our view is there should be de-escalation. There should be discussions between the two countries in order to clarify these issues and resolve them in a way that protects the lives of the innocent.
You're saying there should be de-escalation and discussions between the two countries. However, the Indian Prime Minister has just said a couple of days ago that the time for talks is over. You were also quoted, in fact, as saying that we would be willing to help in de-escalations when you were in Pakistan. What does that mean exactly? Is Saudi Arabia willing to step in and mediate or help out in any other way?
Pakistan is an important country to Saudi Arabia, and India is an important country to Saudi Arabia. And so it pains us to see conflict between two countries that we believe to be friendly countries to Saudi Arabia. We believe that instability in this part of the world presents a danger to the rest of the world. We have great interests in both countries, and we believe that our future should be based on trade and investment and creating job opportunities and combating extremism and helping bring stability. We do not insert ourselves in an issue between two friends unless both friends ask us to. We said that this is something that we hope the two countries can resolve directly. If there is any desire for Saudi Arabia to play a role, I think we would consider it, because both countries, as I said, are important to us. Our trade relations with India alone in the past 2 years have doubled. It's exceeded $28 billion a year in two-way trade, and it will continue to grow. And so we want to make sure that if we can be helpful, I think we would consider it.
If I may ask then, do you think, does Saudi Arabia believe that Pakistan is doing enough to take action against those terror groups that operate from their territory that target India? There's one war on terror that they're fighting on one frontier, but the groups that target India in particular, do you believe they're doing enough to tackle those?
I really haven't looked at this issue closely, because that's not what we do in the foreign ministry. We're diplomats. We're not law enforcement or security people. But I would expect that every country in the world should do everything it can to go after the terrorists, those who finance them, and those who condone their actions. And we certainly have done that in Saudi Arabia.
But does Saudi Arabia acknowledge that the terror that India suffers from emanates from Pakistani soil? Do you acknowledge that?
It's not about acknowledging. It's these groups claim that they're based in, I believe, in Kashmir, and some in Pakistan, some in, I don't know what other areas.
They don't claim it. There's evidence that they are based there.
Well, like I said, we don't follow this issue with that level of specificity. I think the key is no country should allow its territory to be used by terrorist groups to operate anywhere in the world.
I'm laboring on this point on terrorism simply because we do know that, as you mentioned, Saudi Arabia has a very close relationship with Pakistan. You've also just announced $20 billion in investments there before coming to India. I think the concern in India also is that a country as powerful and as influential as Saudi Arabia could do a lot more to press upon Pakistan to act against terrorist groups. And I think the concern, therefore, is that, for instance, today, when the Prime Minister and the Crown Prince were speaking to the media, the Crown Prince did not even mention the Pulwama terror attack that took place not less than a week ago. So I think the sense in India is there's a lot of skepticism about whether Saudi Arabia is really a true friend of India when it comes to terrorism. What would you say?
We were one of the first countries to very strongly condemn the terrorist attack. We have very good relations with India in terms of counterterrorism. We have very good relations with India when it comes to exchanging information against terrorists, including information that led to stopping terrorist attacks. We have
Which
worked,
is true. You've also extradited a lot of terrorists to India.
We've also extradited individuals that were wanted by India, and we have, and we and India have committed to taking that already strong security relationship and elevating it even more, given the danger of what we see happening in the world. And we want to make sure that we work very closely together to ensure that our people and your people are safe. And I have no doubt that this will be accomplished. We believe that we are working with our friends in Pakistan to combat extremism and to go after terrorist groups, and we will continue to do so. And I think working with India and working with Pakistan and working with other friends can help us to eliminate these radical groups that exist in this region.
One last question on Pakistan, which is that during this trip, was the message given to the Pakistani leadership to act on these groups, given the tensions with India? Because this is a terror attack that has overshadowed your visit in both countries. So was there anything specific that Saudi Arabia, that the Crown Prince conveyed to Imran Khan on this?
We have been saying to our friends in Pakistan that they have to act against groups for more than 15 years. We have said, and to their credit, they have worked in the tribal areas. They have lost a huge number of soldiers going after the terrorist groups in the tribal areas. So their view is that they have made a great sacrifice and that they're doing all they can to go after the terrorists. We stand ready to provide support. I believe other countries stand ready to provide support, whether in the West or in the region. I believe the objective is to eliminate terrorist groups wherever they may exist.
Would you support any blacklisting then of Pakistan at the Financial Action Task Force if it comes to that? Because it may.
Again, I think it can, there's a formula for this. Yeah, there's a formula for this, and this is something that's fairly technical, and they check certain boxes, and you either qualify or you don't qualify. So I leave it up to the finance people.
What do you think? Do you think Pakistan's doing enough?
I would be presumptuous if I thought I knew how the Financial Action Task Force.
Oh no, I mean I'm just asking you: does Saudi Arabia think that Pakistan's doing enough? Your joint statement reflected that.
I believe that every country ought to do more than it can do. Even if you ask me, are we in Saudi Arabia doing enough? I would tell you, there is never enough. You have to keep looking for more ways. You have to keep looking for other ways. You have to keep looking for other methods in order to make yourself more effective. You can't have a success and then rest on your laurels.
Do you think India needs to provide more evidence to you, the international community, on the involvement of the Jaish-e-Mohammed and Masood Azhar in this Pulwama terror attack? Do you think that that's what's needed?
I think we are in discussions with India on this, and I think that the Indian government is in discussions with other members of the international community as well as international organizations on this, and I believe it's an ongoing dialogue.
Just turning now again to the India-Saudi relationship, defense cooperation is another area which has emerged as a very important area of cooperation. We're now looking at the possibility of joint exercises, naval exercises. Can you tell us more about what we can expect on that front?
I think we've been looking at joint exercises. We've been looking at joint naval exercises. We're looking at defense manufacturing between our countries. We're looking at the broader security of the Indian Ocean. And we're looking at ways where we can enhance the relationship between our respective militaries and to have a fairly common vision with regards to the strategic issues in the Indian Ocean.
My final question to you, sir, is the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, which has strained ties between Saudi Arabia and the West, particularly the US, although the Crown Prince has got the support of President Trump. Some Western media have suggested that the Crown Prince's visit to Asia, to India, to Pakistan, etc., is also aimed at refurbishing his image. what would you say?
His Royal Highness doesn't have to refurbish his image because his image is not tarnished. The charges are baseless. He had nothing to do with this. He did not give the order. This was a rogue operation. These were individuals who were Saudi government agents who acted outside their authority without any authorization or orders and murdered another Saudi citizen in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. It's outrageous and it's a heinous crime. And so when we discovered that something may have happened, His Majesty and the Crown Prince ordered the public prosecutor to investigate. The public prosecutor began investigation, realized that a murder was committed, leveled charges against 11 of those who were detained. 5 of them are now facing the death penalty. The trials began in early January, and we will make sure that those who committed this crime will be held responsible and punished. In addition to this, His Majesty decreed that an investigation be done to see how the procedures can be made more effective in order to prevent something like this from happening and to have stricter oversight. This committee, which includes a number of ministers and legal counsel, as well as, and is chaired by the Crown Prince, has presented its recommendations to His Majesty, the preliminary recommendations about what needs to be done. And so when you look at what happened, a rogue operation took place. We acknowledged it, we investigated, and we will hold those responsible, and we will punish those who are responsible, and we will put in place mechanisms to prevent something like this from happening again.
Why do you think there's so much skepticism about your version of events in the West, including in the United States, which has been one of your closest allies?
It's been hysteria. I tell people, Oliver North committed Iran-Contra. He thought Reagan ordered him, and Reagan had nothing to do with it. And nobody blames Reagan. Abu Ghraib happened in Iraq, and thousands of prisoners, or hundreds, were abused and tortured, and some of them killed. Do people really think George Bush or Dick Cheney or Don Rumsfeld knew about it or gave the orders? No, they didn't. So what I tell people is, wait until the process is complete. Then judge the process. And if you think it's a Mickey Mouse process, then attack us. But to attack us before you even see the process unfold is not fair, to say the least, and unacceptable, to say the most. The principle in law is innocent until proven guilty. In this case, it's guilty and will not be proven innocent. But in the end, this was a crime committed by people who exceeded their authority. Those people were captured. Those people are facing trial. And many of those people will be punished, and some of them very severely. And the institutions from which they hailed will be examined and will have procedures put in place to prevent it from happening again. That's how you deal with a situation like this. And so wait until the process plays out, then judge us when you see the results.
You have to convince your allies about that, not convince me here. But thank you, Minister, for speaking to us on NDTV today. Thank you.
My pleasure.